Welcome to this week's episode of Being Human. I'm here with Kath Blackham. She is the CEO of Versa. Versa's digital agency that specialises in conversational AI. We were just saying, with a location in Melbourne, we can't say based, right? Because you're remote first in Australia. Kath, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah. And the reason I'm so excited to have you here is you've done incredible things with the culture of Versa, and for which you've been recognised 2019 Campaign Magazine Best Culture across Australia and New Zealand. Number 7 Great Place to Work in 2019. Digital Agency of the Year 2019, again, Campaign Magazine. So yeah, you've clearly done something pretty extraordinary with the company. I'd love to understand how you've led Versa and created that culture.
Well, that's a big question. I think I would start really back at the beginning of why I started Versa, right at the beginning of 2010 it was, or right at the end of 2009. And that really was firstly because I wanted to start my own company and do things a bit differently. But I also wanted to, have a go at living my life's work. And my life's work is to use the platform, which for me is Versa, to move the needle on things that I'm most passionate about. And that's mental health in the workplace, diversity and inclusion, and using tech for good. So I think that when you start a business, not to go and make a lot of money or to get the best clients or have the most fun but you actually set a goal of leaving kind of the place in a better place than when you started, and actually moving the needle and helping society move the needle. It makes it very easy to be very focused on that. And that's, I think, for me, what's helped me build the culture is that we have always had this goal in mind. I wanted to make sure that my employees were able to live their best lives, to manage their mental health in a much more healthy and better way than what was happening in our industry at the time. I wanted to show the industry that we could actually work less but be as productive, and that's where the 4-day week came from. And there was a lot of precursors to the 4-day week. So we were the first, certainly the first agency in Australia to do the 4-day week, but we were one of the very first companies in Australia to do the 4-day week. And so it's allowed me to really practice what I preach, but also to show the rest of Australia and beyond. And I've worked with a lot of UK-based clients as well, or not clients, but companies as well, to show them how you can do things differently and treat your employees better. So I guess that's the journey in a real nutshell, is that I started out with that really core belief that I wanted to make a difference. And everybody says that. It's a pretty easy thing to say. But then I think that over time, what I've been able to do is actually show that I've put in things that have allowed me to get to those, to my life's work effectively, and to achieve my life's work. So that's Brilliant. It. And we talk a lot about that at Versa, what your life's work is, and supporting people in that. Right.
Interesting. And so is that something you ask people when they come in? Is that?
Yep.
But what is your life's work? Wow.
Yeah, and look, it doesn't have to be really big and really, so some people come in with a big, hairy, audacious goal. They want to, it might be something that you're trying to do outside of work. You might want to start your own business, or your life's work might be being the best mum that you can be, or being the best parent. So there's a lot, but what it allows us to do, and a lot of people, it involves work. So they want to, their life's work is, making a difference through the work that they do, or so we don't kind of box people in and make them define it. We ask a very broad question But what it allows us to do is to really get in behind what the motivations of that person is. But also when we're compensating them, we don't just have to look at compensating them with money. We can actually look at, well, what are the other ways that we can compensate that person that supports their life's work? And that might be more time, that might be supporting them to start their own business, that could be giving them a particular type of work, that could be helping them, their life's work might be becoming a CEO of a business. Well, if I know that, I can mentor them to do that.
Yeah. Wow.
So I'm looking for someone to take my job so I can go on holiday. I need a long holiday, so that would be good.
Right. And so what of the people who've come through Versa, which of that answer to the question, what's your life work, has inspired you? That's some that inspired you particularly?
Yeah, look, I love the fact that we have this team and continue to have this team of people that are very, very motivated to make a difference. So where we seem to attract people that we do a lot of not-for-profit work. And so what that means is that we are lucky enough to have people that really are focused not on having big brands on their CV, but actually having meaningful work on their CV where they've actually made a difference to society. And, when you work in digital, it's tough because we don't always, we're not saving lives here. Like we're building digital experiences. We're not saving lives. We're not doctors. So sometimes it can be hard to see the difference that you're making on society. And so it's really, I just get inspired by people that turn up on our doorstep and say, I really want to make a difference. How can I do that? And then they come up with ideas. We're constantly kind of looking for, they'll give up their own time because we have Wednesdays off. So people give up their time to do, give back to, I've got somebody that works for me at the moment who, she works with kids who are in need in her area where she lives. So kids that maybe aren't as fortunate as her own kids. And so she gives up, so she has a Wednesday off. And so instead of dedicating that to getting the housework done and getting her appointments, she gives that entire day to just helping those kids out, going into the schools and helping them out. So those are the kind of people that inspire me every day. Wow.
Okay. That's interesting. And I said, so that's the whole company takes Wednesday off. Is that how you've worked it?
Yep. Yeah. So in 2018, we started what we call the 4-day week. And it is, so we do work 5 days a week so we do the 37.5 hours, but we do it over 4 days. So we're aspiring actually to cut that down to 30 hours. And we are slowly over time cutting that down. But in our industry where people work way over the 37.5 hours generally, so they're working kind of upwards of 50 hours a week sometimes, so they're already doing probably 10 or 11 hours a day. And so to come in and allow people to work effectively the day that they were already working, it's 8 till 6 or just under 8 till 6 to get there, which you probably worked those hours. I certainly worked those hours right throughout my career. But then to give back a whole day in return for doing those hours is really valuable to people because they don't, they're quite happy to work the longer hours each day if they can, if they know that they've got that Wednesday to decompress.
Yeah.
Go for a run, go to the gym, go and get the shopping done, that type of thing. Just look after their mental health and well-being.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's, that's fascinating. And your clients just learn to live with it, right? They embrace it over time, do they?
Yeah. So when we first onboard a client, we kind of take them through why we do it. And one of the big reasons, if we're being a bit business-like about it, so it is about the mental well-being of our team, but it's also about lessening attrition. So actually, it's a very good way of getting really good staff, because it's a very attractive thing in our industry, but it also keeps people with you. And so once clients realize they don't expect you to be available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for them anyway. And so as long as we're in touch with them on a Tuesday afternoon, and then we get back in touch with them on a Thursday morning, and they know that if they need us, they can get us on a Wednesday. So they can always pick up the phone to me, or I've got a couple of layers below me before that they can, they can contact us on our mobiles. They are completely fine, because they know that the team that they're working with today will be the team that they're working with in 2 years' time. And that in our industry is almost unheard of. So
right. Yeah. No, that makes sense.
Yeah. And it's particularly important at the moment, because I presume it's the same in the UK. It's, we just don't have enough resources and technology anymore. So there is this massive shortage going on in Australia of really good talent. We've got a lot of really big Atlassian, Canva, some really big brands that are based out of Australia that are taking a lot of the resources, and they can afford to kind of go in and pay whatever they need to. So to have that differentiator as well is a really great kind of marketing point, if you like, for staff.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. Now, you talked about mental health. So I'm interested there, like what were you observing in terms of mental health, maybe in your own situation or those around you, that had that be one of your focuses when you set up Versa?
So I think we're approaching definitely an epidemic when it comes to mental health issues in the workplace. I think COVID probably fast-tracked a bit and maybe made companies more aware of what was happening with their own team. I think they checked in with them a bit more. I was in a conversation with another big agency CEO the other day, a couple of months ago, and he said, it's so weird. We didn't have any mental health issues in our team really until COVID, and now it's everywhere. And my response to him was, are you joking? Like, of course you had mental health issues. It's just that I think COVID has given employees a language that they can use and a comfort to be able to share that they're not feeling okay. So I think we're facing an epidemic. I think we're working too hard. We're available too often. One of the things that I really advocate for is the fact that it's been 100 years since we have looked at the working week. So it was kind of Henry Ford and all of his cronies that brought in that 5-day week because they wanted an extra day of shopping effectively to buy, because he had cars and he wanted people to drive his cars. And so he was a big advocate for going to the 5-day week. Well, we haven't moved from the 5-day week since then. We've done bits and pieces, and in Europe, there's some countries that are a little bit more progressive than others. But generally speaking, think about over time how productive we've become in 100 years, like the internet, automation, like farming, everything, every facet of our lives, we've become more productive. But instead of giving people back that in time, we've given it back in money. And what that has meant is that houses are more expensive. Everything just becomes more expensive, right? Because we've got more money in our pockets, because companies are giving us more money because they're making more money due to increased productivity. But if we could just, as a society, stop for 2 seconds and think about the impact that that's having on people by always, if you're a white-collar worker, always having your work in your pocket. You go home and your bloody watch is, excuse my language, but your watch is like buzzing and you're buzzing and buzzing and buzzing, and your phone's going off, and that you need to, I might just check because that email might have come through. And, it's not surprising that anxiety as an issue that workplaces are facing is just rising year on year on year. And I think we're not going to stop that from happening until we start to make big changes. I've just gone into the Dutch. Yeah. This is because I'm in the office. Like your message. The timing was amazing.
We will not make changes.
The timing was, I must have looked really scary then. So I'm in the office, and if you don't move for a little while, the lights go off. So that for me is what I'm seeing is an epidemic that is not going away. In fact, it's getting worse and worse. I'm seeing corporate, I was going to say corporate Australia, but I reckon corporates across the world not really truly addressing that anxiety that we can see in our staff. And I'm a big advocate of putting language around mental health. So we have a psychologist that comes in regularly to talk to the team about, what it's like to have anxiety, what it's like to have depression, what it's like to be like, kind of destigmatizing both having anxiety and depression, but also what it's like to go to a psychologist. A lot of people think it's some scary thing, whereas it's, right. You'll quite happily go to the dentist, right? Yeah. And yet you may not even have bad teeth and you'd still turn up to the dentist, because we've learned right from an early age that we have to go to the dentist to prevent tooth decay. And that's so, and make sure that there's no underlying issues. And yet we don't learn from a young age that it's okay to go to the psychologist just to check in to make sure that our mental health is okay. And yet seeing people that have got underlying issues, and actually, and I'll get off my soapbox here, but actually health insurance in this country, at least, I don't know if it's the same in the UK, is if you, and life insurance as well, if you have a mental illness, if you're diagnosed with a mental illness before you get life insurance, your premium is much higher. So that is deep. That is meaning that people don't go to a psychologist and they don't get, because they don't, so there's all these things in society that are kind of stacking against these people that and I have seen people crushed in my business under expectation, and we don't work long hours. I don't have people working on the weekends. I don't have people working nights. I don't have we don't put a huge amount of pressure on people, and yet I still have seen people in my team crushed by anxiety just by what's in their head. So I know that if I've got it in my team where I've got psychologists coming in, we practice gratefulness and mindfulness every day, we have meditation every week, I do everything I possibly can to look after the mental health of my team. And I still have team members, and the reason that I know that is that I've destigmatized it and given it a language that means that people can just put up their hand and say, do you know what? I'm struggling. I've got this. And they know that I'm not going to be shocked by it, worried by it. They're certainly not going to be judged by it. And so I can help them get over whatever it is that they're getting over. So, and again, it works to my advantage because people want to stay because it's a safe environment where they know that they're going to be, if they're predisposed to mental illness, they're going to be protected. I'm going to help them. I'm not going to, and so many people get judged by mental illness. If you break your leg, everybody's rushing around riding on your leg and helping you into the lift and helping you up the stairs. If you've got a mental illness, which can be 10 times as debilitating in the office, no one wants to be anywhere near you. They don't know what to say. They don't probably even know that, they maybe heard a rumor that you maybe are not coping, as they call it, but there's no, it's not recognized as something in the same way that the flu is, or that, and so it just makes it much, much harder for people. Sorry, I'll just get off my soapbox. You can see that I have many soapboxes that I step onto every now and again. So
no, but that's such
tell me to get off.
A powerful treatise. And I think, there's so much in what you've said. And the two themes that I'm picking out of that is, one, let's destigmatize it. Let's talk about it. Let's have it be normal to say, it be as normal to say I broke my leg over the weekend as it is to say I had a breakdown, an emotional breakdown, right? I mean, imagine if those two were at parity in terms of being able to just share it with your colleagues. That would be an extraordinary difference, wouldn't it? So that makes complete sense to me. But then the fact you're actively implementing in the culture mechanisms to to improve mental health, right? I mean, I think there must be some kind of boundary where certain needs can only really be met outside of the workshop, outside of the workplace. But there's still a lot that can be done in the workplace.
Yeah, and look, I'm a big believer in preventative rather than aftercare. So for pretty much everything, actually, but certainly when it comes to mental health. But you are exactly right that you have to, as a business, know when to stop. And we talked about ideas that have failed, and I have so many, because I'm a real kind of, here's an idea, let's do this, and everybody I work with sighs, and where I'm all about failing fast. So, but one of the things that I really was passionate about was to build an app that allowed people to manage their own kind of mental health. So, like, ask them questions every day, take vitals potentially. So feed in things like blood pressure and things that you can get off your smartwatch, really.
Yeah.
And then help kind of that individual identify triggers so that they could then go, oh, okay, so normally your days are at a 5 or a 6 and you're at a 3 for the last 2 weeks. I think that you maybe, here's some ways that you could help. So, and we're a digital agency, so I was kind of we could just build an app for this. And I did a lot of research. I found a professor who had a team of PhD students that were helping me. What I found when I was doing the kind of initial research into that project was actually that that's not what employees want, because that is a great example of stepping over the line. They did not want their employer, even me, who I have, I think, destigmatized mental health in my workplace. They didn't want their employer having access to, there was this, well, why would I write that down? Why would I be that exposed on a work app? I wouldn't, if work gave me an app, I'm not going to tell work how I'm feeling every single day unless, not to that level. I don't want them knowing when I possibly might, because I want to be able to have control of that information. So that's a really good example of something that I was hell-bent on doing that I really felt was going to make a difference. And but actually taking a step back, and looking at it from the employee's perspective, I could totally see that actually an employer doesn't need to know, the employee does need to have control of that information. And even though I said, yes, but it would only be you, they said, yeah, but I'd sign up through my employer's account, right? It would be them that would be paying for it. And I went, yeah, that's exactly what would happen. And they said, yeah, that would never happen. I would not want, I would feel like it was Big Brother watching me, and that's not what I want. So I think there is that real line in the sand where you need to support, you need to give employees the tools that allow them to manage their own mental health, but you can't get involved in it. It's got to be their own journey, I think.
Yeah. No, that makes total sense. I also know from my own experience and with my own mental health is that some days I want to face it, right? And I want to acknowledge the fact that something's going on and maybe there's something to address. And other days I just don't even want to look at how I am, right? I just want to kind of be checked out from my own state. So I can also see that as a potential like resistance to something like that. I don't want to know.
Yeah. And you don't want to, one of the things that I was really conscious of when I started Versa is I didn't want to create a cult, right? Like I don't want it to be so that everyone's walking around like, hi, and like it shouldn't be this like we're all happy, we've all got to be happy, you've got to love Versa every day of the week, you can't hate Versa. Like, this is a normal work environment where sometimes you love your job and sometimes you don't. And I wanted also to create that environment where that was okay, because I think that sometimes companies like ours is we can be in danger of creating this environment where people don't feel that they can feel bad about their job because it's like, oh, but they're doing everything for me and I should love it every day. And it's like, that's just not realistic. Sometimes we ask people to do things that they might have to work on a client they don't want to, or they might have to, the project they're working on might not be a great project, or, and we don't get it right all the time. Sometimes, my need for change constantly and being better and better and better is not always a good thing. I talk a lot about needing to be comfortable being uncomfortable, but I sometimes wonder even deep down whether I'm just actually trying to give myself an excuse just to keep coming up with crazy ideas. And that's not always okay with a team, like to be like, oh my God, right. So this week we're doing this, and then Kath's going to come up with this next week, and then next week we're going to be doing that. That's not necessarily a great thing. So I don't want to sit here today and paint a picture that we're perfect, and I don't want employees to feel like they have to feel like it is like a cult. You will love us and you will say I love Versa every day. That's not it. So
so I'm intrigued by the practices. So you mentioned gratitude, you mentioned mindfulness. How does that actually like play out during the day? Like, what does it look like?
Yeah, so I'm very glad you asked, because for the last 4 or 5 years, we have had a ritual that we get together, every single person that can be there, that is, so it's not always the whole company. And we go round, and when we used to be in person, we would go round in person. Now it's virtual. And we say, we rate the day from the day before. We talk about any blockers. We say what our focus for the day is, and we say something we're grateful for. So the rating the day before is really important, because it allows us, I guess, as a leadership team to get an overall feel of where the agency's at. You can very quickly, so the average kind of number at Versa is about a 7 or 8, ish, so a 9 is really good. A 10 and we all clap, so you might have 1 10 per year. That would be it. So people don't use it very sparingly. A 9 if you're really happy, a 7 or 8 is normal. But if you start getting down into the 4s and 5s, that's when we kind of know. And if there's a lot of people that are around that 6 to 8, we know that there's something going on. People are stressed, there's too much work, or there's not enough work, or something is not quite right. But it also allows us to, what we have found, which is what I didn't expect, is that it gives people a chance to verbalize how they're feeling in a very non-threatening way. So remembering, I know it to you probably sounds like horrific, and it does to any new employee, to be fair, as well. But once you've been doing it for months and months on end, it just becomes normal. You don't even think about you actually just say what comes to mind. So, but it does allow you to kind of say, hey, I'm struggling, without actually saying those words.
Yeah.
So if you say yesterday was a 4, you can 100%, one of the things that people say to me around the business when I, sit down with people to see how they're going and stuff, they say, I just love the fact that if I say yesterday was a 4, I get at least 5 or 6 people from the business, different people just checking in on me to say, hey, I know you were struggling. Is today better? Or not a big deal, not like sound the alarm, get the, mental health professionals in. It's nothing like that. It's just, hey, is there anything that I can do to help? I know you're struggling at the moment. You can certainly expect to hear from your direct manager to see if there's anything they can do to help, but also just random people across the business, people that maybe were paying attention when you were doing it. So that's the rating. Obviously, the blockers and stuff is all about us just making sure that we can get work through and that people aren't sitting there. But then the best thing that we do is every single morning, somebody has to turn up with something they're grateful for. And my thought processes on doing that was that, and I have a 16-year-old daughter, so I can tell you that it can be an utter mess in the morning sometimes. Finishing with her slamming her way out of the house in a huff because she's not happy that I told her she couldn't wear her uniform in a certain way or whatever. So, you take a lot of baggage with you of whatever's happened in that morning into work. Like, you can't help it, right? You wake up and you have a bad morning. But by saying something you're grateful for, you're creating this circuit breaker, because to come up with one thing, the process that you go through, interestingly, is not, you don't just go straight for that one thing. You normally are like, what am I grateful for? Like, am I grateful for coffee? I'm always grateful for coffee. Am I grateful for my, that person did. I loved hanging out with my friends. I loved that movie last night. So you're thinking of all this stuff and then you land on one thing. But it's just that little moment that you've actually changed your narrative from, holy hell, this is a bad day, I hate my daughter, blah, 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 to, okay, so there is some good things going on anyway, like I'm actually grateful that, and I always say we live in Australia. We are super, super lucky to live in this country. We are not in the middle of a war. We are not under a regime. We're not, there's so you can't tell me that you don't have, because if nothing else, everybody that lives in this country should be grateful for that. We've got a team in Nicaragua. They're not so happy about living there, but they always find, and that's a really good leveler as well, because they hear that what's going on in Nicaragua and the leadership that's happening over there, and that can make people feel grateful. And often it's like, oh, I'm just really grateful that I've got a democratic process, that it means, the leaders of the country might be idiots, but at least they're the idiots that we legitimately voted in, which is a different thing. So I think that is the big practice that we do. And then, like I said, there are we have a psychologist that comes in about 4 times a year. We do meditation. We're actually doing meditation once every 2 weeks now. We were doing it every week, but it was
that's the whole company gets together and meditates together. Wow.
Online. And it's interesting. So you would say that is not possible to meditate online. And we're actually finding that it is entirely possible to. So it's all about relaxation. We turn off our cameras and, you find a comfortable place to sit or lie or whatever. And then you just listen to, we've got this one woman that we work with. We've, worked with different people in the past. But I'm just a big believer in giving people the tools to be able to do it themselves. So I'm not expecting that once every 2 weeks is the answer, but it may not, you don't want to do it too much when you're kind of making people, if that makes sense. So we kind of do insist on people turning up every morning and kind of checking in with one another, because unless they've got a meeting or or they're on holiday or whatever, you don't want to make it too optional, because people just opt out of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because the more stressed they are, the more likely they are to opt out. So it is a little bit, so you do have to just really be careful not to go overboard. And again, one of my failings is that I probably go overboard, not underboard with some of this stuff. So, so we do, and then we have things that allow, there's this whole remote first. So we also have a whole lot of rituals around bringing people together so that they can get to know one another, new starters, etc. And most of that is done in the morning, our time, because it works with our team in Nicaragua, and it really gets you started. And then it's all about you and your day after that.
Right. And you're using this term ritual. Is that like a conscious part of the culture here? You talk about a ritual, and that's.
It's not something that we all go and say, oh, how was that ritual today? We don't use it, and it's not a thing. It's not a cult, remember, if I'll go back to my previous comment.
No, but I could just imagine some listeners being like, oh, that's an interesting word to be using, right? Like, yeah.
Yeah, so, but I do talk about it in terms of what's that, just as a way to kind of decide, because I kind of see it almost like our bag of tools that we have available, and that's that we give over to our employees. So we show them how to do meditation. We give them a psychologist to help them kind of understand, how to manage their mental health. We, there's all sorts of things that we do throughout the week. And it is a thing that we do every single week. And I want people to think of it as a ritual, because it's very easy to do things once. It's much harder to embed it into a culture. And you will be surprised to find out that actually getting a 4-day week, our version of the 4-day week, and I'm always very careful to say that, is getting our version of the 4-day week into the company and actually be a thing. You would think that people would be like, sweet, I get to have Wednesdays off, but it wasn't that simple. Like, people needed convincing. There was a trust, like, is she for real? Is this a trick? Like, am I really supposed to work Wednesdays anyway? I see new people come into the business all the time, and they say, they're kind of thinking, well, she says that we have Wednesdays off, but can we really have, can I really trust that if I go and organise something for a Wednesday, that people aren't going to be talking behind my back going, oh my God, I can't believe that they actually take that day, So there was a trust that needed to be built up, but also, again, it's got to be something that's in your day-to-day ritual of, like, I don't work on Wednesdays, and you've got to be conscious of it every week, because the moment that you start thinking of Wednesday as your extra day that you can work is the day that it all falls over. If we don't actively manage it for people, they can't.
Yeah.
And it's a positive thing. People want to work hard. They want to give that. They've got a heap on. They really want to get through it. But we're very careful to make sure that if people are working on a Wednesday, it's for a very good reason, and it's only periodically. It's not every single Wednesday.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And when I think about it as an individual, so you could say that we're a collection of our habits, right? That's who we are. We're a collection of our habits. And if you extend that then to the company, it becomes the company at some level is the collection of its rituals, or its habitualized behaviors and a ritual is a way of doing that. So it's every Wednesday that we take off.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, until it becomes a habit, and then it takes hold, and then it becomes sustained in the culture. In the same way with your check-ins, and I guess the same way with your meditation.
Yeah.
Like I really seeing clearly the importance of framing it as a ritual.
Yeah, and I can kind of still remember, or not kind of, I can remember the day that I realized that the check-ins were actually embedded. So it wasn't, so even that very simple ritual of just getting together and saying something you're grateful for and rating the day before, etc., took quite a long time to get to a point that if I wasn't there, i.e. I was on holiday, or if Crazy Kath wasn't in the house, that it didn't just fall off pretty much straight afterwards. So, that I remember coming back and it being a thing when I came back from the holiday, and I was like, right, now I know that this is something that will be sustained no matter where I am. I don't need to turn up to a check-in to make sure that people are doing what. And I know that sounds really, as I say it sounds really draconian and like you will do this. But if I just left it up to people, they just wouldn't do that for themselves, because sometimes we need to be accountable to one another for looking after each other. And that's kind of how I feel. But I do know that now people love it. But when they first come into the business, they couldn't think of anything worse than turning up. And they don't see it as like, why am I turning up at 9:00 every morning to just say what I'm grateful for? This is ridiculous. And it's not until they've been doing it for a while that they realize the group benefit as well as the individual benefit of doing that.
Yeah. And I really see the importance of making it mandatory, because there's a part of me that bristles at that. Like, no, surely this should be a voluntary thing. But I get it, right? Like, unless it's mandatory, it's not going to become ritualized. It's not going to become a habit. And if I apply it to as a business, as a group, you're not going to engage in it as habitually.
No.
And if I think to my own experience, like if I didn't make myself brush my teeth every morning and tell myself like I have to do this, I wouldn't do it, right? And of course, now it has become habitualized. I don't need to do that. But going to the gym, if I don't make it mandatory for myself, for my own personal sort of effectiveness habits, let's say, I'm not going to do it either. So it does make sense that it has to be mandatory.
Yeah, but you just have to be careful when you use that mandated ritual sparingly. So, it's done very thoughtfully. And I think, again, when I think about places where I've gone wrong and I've been wrong, it's where I've overdone that need for to help people help themselves, and therefore put too much of an onerous kind of task on people that actually just want to get in and do their work. So, COVID was tough for me because I'm a real feeler. So I was like, I wanted to just wrap people up, and because we had like whatever it was in Melbourne, something ridiculous, 268 days in lockdown. So we had a huge amount, almost a year of just being in our home. So the impact on people's mental health and on their families and just everything, just the impact on people generally was awful to watch. And so my reaction was, right, we've got to get together more, and we've got to, drop off food. And sorry, I hope you're not going to use the video content part of this.
Adding to the entertainment.
So I just wanted to, I remember like cooking for people and dropping it off and, getting people together and playing games and stuff. Whereas actually looking back, I just did too much. You can try too hard as well. So, and I think a lot of companies suffered under that. They wanted to try and keep their culture going, whereas actually you just had to kind of let it go and just realize that it was a different time, and that it was okay that on a Friday night you weren't all sitting around. You didn't have to virtually, after a whole day on Zoom, sit around and stare at each other on a screen and try and recreate Friday night drinks. I mean, that was not recreating Friday night drinks. Like right. It wasn't at a pub. Your family was all surrounding you wanting dinner. It wasn't even close to being Friday night drinks. So I think that was a real learning for me during COVID, is just to relax and be sparing about how I use those rituals. So yes.
Yeah, no, that makes some sense. And it's interesting what you said, this probably sounds horrendous, that idea of giving a number of the day before. And actually, I think you're right. I think that version of asking people how it's going is, as you say, is much easier, because when we were talking about failings, when I've tried to do this kind of practice and said to people, okay, how are you feeling around the room of like English people? Like everybody says, I'm fine.
Yeah, of course they do.
Right? It's pointless, right? It's pointless asking the question. Whereas if you ask something like that, like give me a number, you're not. It's not too difficult because you're not asking how are you feeling, but you're still asking people to give an indication that's safe for them to express of how it's going. So,
and also there's a trust there over time that you're not going to follow that up right in front of a big group. So you haven't got 70 people staring at you and you say, yesterday was a 4, and someone steps in and says, oh, so tell me about it. Like what happened? Nobody says that. It is, it really goes, yesterday was a 9. I've got no blockers. My focus for today is a podcast that I've got on this evening, and I'm grateful for my husband. He doesn't really. He's not always on the grateful list, but I'm grateful for my husband. And then you move on, and it also creates this opportunity with the gratefulness I can say, and I often do, and other people do, I'm grateful to Stephen, who I work with, for a great meeting this morning. Was awesome, kind of having our morning walks together, so it also creates that ability to do shout outs. So suddenly that gratefulness is you get a double out of it, because you're also making someone else feel good as well. So no, I love that. I'm taking it all in, and it makes it makes a lot of. We've got a lot of stuff.
I suppose what we've been doing is we're going over the building blocks of the culture that makes Versa what it is.
I just the other thing that I'm a big believer in that hasn't translated into and this might be a segue into the remote first, but something that we used to do when we were all in the office. So this is when we were Melbourne based, and we're certainly not that now. We would do what we called 3 p.m. walkies. So that sounds very twee and weird, but I'm a big believer in dogs. So I have 2 of my own, and we used to have up to 5 or 6 in the office, so my 2 plus, whoever. There was actually,
does that get a bit noisy? Do they sang each other off?
So it ended up, actually, funnily enough, it ended up being that we had a Slack channel where you would have, because there were so many people that had dogs that wanted to bring them in, and there were certain dogs that couldn't be with other dogs, so you would have to go, like Milo, my oldest dog, was the office dog right from the beginning, so he got a free ticket, but everybody else kind of had to coordinate to do it. But what we would do, and I actually got this from a book that I read way back in 2011 around this concept of breaking together at 3 p.m. and going for a walk just for 10 minutes as a group. And as in 2011, we were like 5 people. So that didn't look super unusual. In 2019, we were 70 people. That looked a little bit more unusual to have 70 people walking around the block. But you would literally just, a sound would go off. You would down tools for literally 10 minutes, go down the stairs, walk around the block, and come back up and get started again. And what that meant is that you had a break. It really forced you to kind of take a breath. It also allowed you to maybe talk to someone across the business that you wouldn't normally talk to, because actually the people that walk at your pace aren't necessarily the people that you work with. So on a day-to-day basis, so you might end up talking.
The slow walking mafia and the fast walking mafia, right?
I'm a slow walking mafia, so I used to hang back, and people would. And, you'd notice that people would maybe hang back with me if they wanted just to have a word, that, that they didn't want to kind of book a meeting or do anything like that. But it was just another, to hate to use that word again, because I've never used it so many times in a conversation, but another ritual that we did, but it just has not translated. We tried to do it when we went remote first. We've done all sorts of things. We've kind of sent out a message and said, everybody kind of get on Zoom and let's do a Zoom walk together. We've encouraged people, sent out messages, but actually now that everybody's at home, they want to do their own, the whole thing about being at home is that you can, get up and put the washing out. As I'm a big fan of the Pomodoro, that whole you work intensely for 20 minutes. And for me, that works perfectly because I super concentrate knowing that I'm going to have 5 minutes to do the dishes from this morning, from the kids' breakfast dishes this morning, or I know that they should do their own. They don't.
Got enough trouble with the uniform.
Yeah. And then, I should, so I'm able to do that. So actually that was something that didn't work and didn't translate. And that has been a huge learning curve for me, is that we had this incredible culture, in-person culture. When COVID happened at the beginning of 2020, it coincided with us, unfortunately, I've got to say, expanding globally. So we opened an office in Seattle on the 6th of March, 2020. So that didn't go so well for us because we went straight into the COVID. So that was bad. But so there was more and more remote people anyway. And so when COVID hit, I sat everybody down and just said, just go to where you feel safe and comfortable. And once we could see that it was going to be in for the long haul, it was pretty obvious reasonably early that it wasn't going to be a flash in the pan thing. Yeah. And so, I had people go to New Zealand. I had people go to Brisbane. I had somebody go back to Mexico. People just spread to Perth, which is like a 4-hour flight away. So everybody kind of dispersed, or not everybody, some people dispersed. Other people moved down to the beach and rented out houses rather than renting in the city. And so after COVID, we haven't been able to go back because I've now got a really dispersed. And so the most challenging thing for 2022 for me, because 2021 we were still in and out of COVID really, is really learning or creating from scratch another culture, which is a remote first culture. And we're not there yet. So I hope that I can talk to you in a couple of years' time. I reckon that's how long it's going to take me I hope that we're sitting here, me in the dark with no lights on, talking to you about what all the amazing things that we've done to make remote first. But it is definitely a work in progress. And I can see that the spoils are huge if you can get it right, but you have to work twice as hard on a culture that is, and you can't rely on, like we used to do a bake-off every Monday morning. We would bake off, and it became this massive thing. My husband would say way too massive. He was like, you guys are ridiculous, because we would cook for everybody. And, so every 6 weeks it felt like, maybe it was a bit more than that, you would be facing off against 2 other people, like baking, and you'd think for weeks about what you were going to bake and who was going to win. It's ridiculous. And but fun, and it was great because on a Monday we all ate really nice things. When we tried to take that online, that yes, you can do a bake off. We used to do a blunch off where people would take photos, but it's not the same. And so what I've really had to work with the team on is we have to create every single thing almost from scratch again.
Yeah.
And we have to think of new ways to cut. And part of my belief is on the remote first is actually being really conscious about coming together. And that means it's expensive, but we've weighed it out by not having a massive, massive office now. So we've got a very small, we've got a very small office in comparison. And so that has meant that we can spend the money on bringing people together regularly for much bigger, so that you can still create those memories, because it's so hard to create memories online.
No,
almost
that makes
impossible.
Sense. Yeah, and certainly the research, because we've had a few people on the podcast who've researched remote working, right, academics and so on, and it seemed to be from what I understood is that for transactional. So a couple of interesting things from the research is like for transactional work, of efficiency and effectiveness actually goes up. So if it's just you getting tasks done, that's better at home. Then the research, it doesn't really make any difference about promotion prospects and the progression through companies if you're remote or not, whereas you think all of those in-person moments would put you in a better light with your boss or whatever. So that doesn't appear to be true. But where it does seem to have a negative impact is on creative work. So when you're doing complex projects, creative projects, don't seem to be as easy to do online. And so I'm just wondering what your experience has been, especially given you're running a digital agency on that score.
Yeah, so 100%. So we have found that we still now fly people in for collaboration on big projects, but we're much more sparing about it, obviously. So we don't. So we've 100% lost that incremental brainstorm. Let's all just jump on a whiteboard and kind of nut this out. And if you spoke to any creative, they would say it's not the same. I don't think it is necessarily affected. I mean, we're not a creative agency. We're not building advertising campaigns and that kind of thing. So our digital is very tech focused. So we're doing a lot of that conversational AI, and so we do build websites, but we're designing. It's a lot more research based, a lot more, and actually we're finding research groups are better. So we're interestingly, you get a better caliber of people to ask, because people are much happier just to jump on Zoom than they are to come in to do focus groups. And so you're much more likely to, and also, and actually you just touched on it before, you were saying around that it doesn't impact at all your ability to get a promotion. Some of the research that I've seen, and certainly what I've seen myself as well, is that actually for some people it's better online, because and in meetings in particular, and I am I'm the exception to the rule for sure, that there are, and particularly there's a male kind of predisposition to use size and sound of voice to dominate in a conversation, and that allows you to, and we're just predisposed to it. It's just as humans, like we want to get we want to get our point across. We want to be strong, and males are much, much better at it. This is a fact. So this is that. Unfortunately, males are much more confident at just getting their opinion across in a meeting. What happened when COVID happened is everybody goes onto the little screen. Suddenly, you're not able to use size. You can actually turn somebody down or off. You had to actually wait your turn, so you couldn't. It was harder to break in on people, and so I think it gave some females more of a platform to actually show whereas they may have just sat back and let the male take all the limelight. They're not as likely to do it on Zoom. So and so I think actually it might go the other way for some people, where they've actually got a better chance of showing their worth when they're not competing with the loud person like me.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, that's true. And I did have this debate with somebody else once. I think you're right in general. It's the males who tend to dominate. But I also, having been a formerly very shy male, and I've done a lot of work on it over the years, I can say that it's not always, the case that it's the males who are the most dominant in conversation.
100%. Oh, yeah. I mean, and I'm a case in point. You can imagine I've never been a wallflower when it came to meetings, etc. But again, it's great when you're the boss and you become a little screen. You can't dominate either. You have to wait for your turn for your little square to light up, and you have your moment as well. So
yeah, absolutely. Good. Okay. Well, talking about offices, as I mentioned, I'm going to get thrown out of this room that I'm currently in 6 minutes. But this has been like a wonderful, education, right? In how to build a culture, albeit physically, as you say. You're now learning how to do that online.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll get to do, like I said, part two, the follow-up on that. I'm really looking forward in a way to reimagining what this could be, but also, being like we've always been as a company, brave on trying new things and seeing what works and what doesn't. So I think we as a company have decided that we want to be remote first. Everybody in the company has bought into that to some level. Like not everybody, we have offices, the office that I'm in now that you can come into if you want to, but I can tell you nobody comes in. Like they just don't want to come in because it's so easy for them to work from home. And so, watch the space. I think that there'll be lots of interesting, not just us. I think companies will do virtual offices. There'll be super interesting stuff being done in the next 24 months, I reckon. Yeah. Hopefully.
Yeah. No, I think they will. I think we'll adapt as humans, but we will find new ways. I guess at least all your dogs get to come in, right? There's no negotiation on Slack.
No. There's no negotiation.
They got the place to themselves.
I know. People that haven't worked in an environment where it's like a lot of dogs, you're like, that must be mayhem. But actually, once they all get to know one another, it doesn't matter if you've got one dog, two dogs, or six dogs. They just all relax on one another and just lie around. So I know you're not even going to believe me. I can hear you. I can see you going, yeah, right. As a
no. I can imagine. I can imagine because that dogs do that. They form packs. I'm guessing a hierarchy forms, and they. No, I totally can see that. Yeah.
But my husband always says, "What would happen if you didn't like dogs?" And I'm like, "Well, I guess that's a little bit of a filter that goes on at which we don't have to contend with now." But I always said I'd never had anyone that said to me they didn't like the dogs. But as a dog lover, of course, no one's going to say to the boss, I hate your dogs. Said no one ever. So anyway.
I guess you do have that risk now. You hire people remote first and then you will end up in the office. And they see the dogs. I'm out.
Yeah, this is not what I signed up for. No, I don't think we'll go backwards. I can't see us ever going back into an office environment. Never say never, but I'd be very surprised. I think the way that we're set up now, we've just got too many people that have made too many life choices, good life choices that are really working for them. I could never, and I know it's happened in the UK, right, where people have moved further out of London, and now the companies are saying, "Oh, you've got to come back in," and they're like, "What? Like I've moved, moved to Nottingham. I'm not coming in from Nottingham."
Yeah, exactly. And it's about becoming a political issue now, right? Because a lot of the civil servants are like refusing to go back to the office, and the politicians are like, "Get back in the office." So
what a great way to lead, like get back into the office, and then they're like, no, and now you can't come back into the office at all because we've got COVID. Oh, now you can come back in, and so it's just, hopefully most businesses have learned the fundamental lesson that many of us knew pre-COVID, but many more of us as business leaders know now, and that is that if you give the trust to your staff, they will return with the fact that you can trust them. They'll give you what you need from them. So, I think that there was this belief that if you let people work from home, they would just sit around and game or, not work properly. And I think that COVID has allowed us to see that actually they work better and smarter when they're in the when a little trust is given to them to manage their own time.
Yeah, I think that's so true, isn't it? And long may that.
So thank you for having me. Thank you very much for having me. Thanks for letting me
sharing your evening. Yeah, I really appreciate it. And I hope we spoke offline about your son with his accident. I hope he recovers well.
He'll be fine. He'll be fine. Good. These things happen to 13-year-old boys. It was on the growth plate. So he was just growing so fast. He shouldn't have been growing so fast. That's what we told him. Like if you just slowed down, he's much taller than me now. So if he just slowed down growing, this wouldn't have happened. So anyway, well, lovely to meet you. Thank you for having me. And thanks for letting me get on my soapbox on a Friday evening.
Yeah, no, it's been great. Thanks again.
Amazing. See you later.
See you later. Bye.